I'd like to call today's meeting to order. It is the work of the Wichita Public Schools. The work of the Wichita Public Schools is to empower all students with 21st century skills and knowledge necessary for success by providing a coherent, rigorous, safe, and nurturing, culturally responsive, and inclusive learning community. Mike?
Under public communications, no one is registered to speak. Consent?
Stan?
No items.
Cheryl?
I just have one question, but I just want the question answered. When would our teachers get these raises?
We have our budgeting department. It changes by the moment, so I want to make sure that I'm correct. Teachers would receive their longevity pay on November the 30th. They will see their salary increase. The other part of their increase in their compensation will happen on their December check, which would be also the retroactive pay as well.
Thank you, and I really do need it pulled. I just want to get that.
Lynn?
And I just follow up on that. The retroactive goes back to the start of the contract year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. No, nothing to pull.
Betty?
Nothing?
Joy?
Well, I would like to pull A1, please.
Okay.
I move that we accept the rest of the agenda items.
Second.
I have a motion by Cheryl and a second by Betty to accept the remaining items. Cast your vote by raising your right hand. Passes 6-0. I can't see all the hands. Joy?
I just had a quick question. So some of this came out at 9 this morning, and I had a quick question and then a few comments. And I think this is a significant issue. Not my question, but I think A1 is a significant item in our district, something we've been talking for a long time, and I think to pull it off of consent and have a short conversation is the right thing to do. So one of my questions is, and this is maybe me misunderstanding, but I noticed that in this morning's agenda, there's an item for approving superintendent salary adjustment as well. And I believe in the superintendent's contract, there is a natural escalator that is tied to teacher contracts. It was my understanding that that would start for next year after her first year of employment. And so I was a little surprised when I saw this. Have I just misunderstood? And I haven't had a chance to ask for a contract because we just got this. So have I misunderstood that, or can someone speak to that?
Cheryl?
I think we've always, in the past, given the superintendent whatever percentage of raise was appropriate right along with the other teachers. And I'm not uncomfortable with doing that.
I guess I would think that had she finished her first year and again, this is not about the quality of work that our superintendent is doing because she's doing an outstanding job. But generally, you would expect someone to finish a year of work before getting a raise.
Betty?
Traditionally, and I agree with what Cheryl has said, that is a part of the contract that whatever percentage the teachers get, the superintendent would get that also. If we've not made an exception in the past for previous superintendents, and there have been some that have started brand new, such as the predecessor, we have recognized that that's been the procedure. So from my perspective, to look at possibly changing that certainly does not carry any kind of value, and really it would seem awfully unfair from the way I see things.
Any other comments? guess we need a motion, one way or another.
Okay, I don't have a comment on the superintendent's piece, but I do have a comment about the contract in general.
Okay.
First of all, I just want to say that I'm really happy that we've come to an agreement with United Teachers of Wichita. Our teachers do an incredible amount of work every day in the classroom. They are the front line for the community's children. Each and every day, they do that hard work. And I think, to be honest, I wish we had more money to give them. They are an outstanding group of people. I've been so impressed with our teachers over the last 9 years that we've lived in the district and watching what they do every day for our students. And not just our teachers, all of our staff, but today I think is a good day to honor our teachers. I also just want to commend the board on working hard to get the calendar back to where it was before we cut the days and cut the number of days and extended the length of the day. We've talked about that at the table a little bit, but that is to work through that and make sure we got that into this contract is really important because our students are losing educational opportunity under the current contract, and the new one will allow us to add those days back. So I wanted to thank the board for working on that and taking such a good stand on that in the negotiation process this year. And with that, I would move that we approve the contract and take the recommended action.
Second.
Mike, I have a comment.
I have a motion by Joy and a second by Stan, and I've also got a comment by Lynn.
I wanted to speak about the contract in light of my work in the Capitol as a senator. I have already heard from folks in Topeka that criticizing our contract in the sense that us and almost all other school districts are putting most of the money into salaries for staff. And I guess I just want to be able to tell people, and the objection is that they don't feel like we're putting the money towards the 25% that the courts talked about. And I guess I just want to stress that when we support our teachers and our staff, that does reach those kids that are in the classrooms. It's putting money in classrooms. It's putting money where the work is done. And quite frankly, with the years of no raises, our teachers and staff have been paying that price. And so I can defend the funds that we're using for salaries. And it's very important that we do provide a competitive salary. I think in the future, board is going to need to ask for how do we compare to other districts, both starting salary and, at the 5 and 10 year and 20 year range, so that we can determine, are we competitive? How do our benefits compare? We've just got to continue to keep that at the forefront. Our goal over time on this board has been to try to pay as high a salary as we can. Unfortunately, we've had a 7-year hiccup. But hopefully that will change and go backwards or go forward so that we don't have to delay payments and increases. So I guess I just want to be able to communicate to the public that this is putting money towards the 25% lowest performers. It's putting money towards every child in the classroom when teachers are compensated adequately, and we still have a ways to go to make up for the years that we've lost out. We need to really focus on the benefits for those kids, and this will do that. So in that regard, I can say I can support this contract.
Any other comments? Stan?
Just a real quick one. I'd like to dovetail on what Board Member Rogers just said. I think we are in a unique situation in that we have the advantage of having a board member who has been through this and is now in the legislature and can go up to Topeka and explain why we went this direction on this contract. And I do hope that it will be conveyed to Topeka that this was a very unique year. This was a year where we had to turn a corner on morale issues. We had to turn a corner on the fact that educators have felt under attack for over 7 years now. And this is one contract that I think you can justify 100%, where almost all the new monies, the monies that the state gave us this year, does go to teacher salary. And I also think we have an issue with in the need of recruiting minority teachers, and in order to deal with our suspension and expulsion rates. And the only way we're going to make progress on that is with attractive starting salaries. So, because there's a lot of competition for what people in college can go in, what field they can go into. So I think we're in a unique situation. I'm glad we have Board Member Rogers who can make the smooth transition from being on the Wichita School Board to explaining, because I think there will be questions up in Topeka on why we spent so much money of our new money on teacher salary. And I think it's great that we have Board Member Rogers to explain that situation. And I think the board is united in the fact that this can be 100% justified. And again, I just echo what everybody else said, was thank you to the teachers for everything you do. This is really where you make the system work for us, and we appreciate it, and we appreciate your hard work. And I really appreciate our negotiating team as well, as I know they put in many hours, and they deserve a lot of thanks as well. So thank you.
Lynn?
I guess I'd like to add one other thing too, particularly in light of the superintendent's contract and the raise for that. If I'm remembering from past experience, brand new teachers that sign a contract, in September, even though they haven't finished a full year, they'll also get this raise as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Well, one comment on that, it seems a little strange to be accepting a contract almost at Thanksgiving's, and that's kind of thrown my time frame off, thinking, gee, it's almost the end of the year, and we're finally approving a contract. So I think that's brought a little bit of confusion, because you're right, Lynn and Cheryl, that we've given the superintendent raises right along with the teachers, but usually we're doing this in August, not November. So, and I do want to say thank you to the teachers. I know there's been a lot of good comments, and I don't want to take up a lot of the time of staff, but the teachers are what makes us look good, and we appreciate them a lot, and we appreciate the administration right along with them. So with that, if there's no more comments, we have a motion on the floor. If you'll vote where I can see you. Looks like it's 6-0. Next item, Mike.
Under Operations, Kansas Association of School Boards Legislative Committee Report. Board President Mike Rohde is the board's representative on the KASB Legislative Committee. This agenda item provides an opportunity for discussion of the KASB committee report as provided in Appendix 9. The KASB Delegate Assembly will be held on December 3rd as part of the 100th Annual KASB Convention at the Hyatt Regency and Century 2 Convention Center in Wichita. Board Vice President Betty Arnold is the board's delegate. This item provides an opportunity for the board's discussion and/or appropriate action.
Okay, there's really not a lot of changes in this, even from last year. A lot of word work to get it better and build a better stance. So what I would do is, if there's any questions about this, I'd be happy to try and answer them. And if not, we'll need to approve them so that Betty is told how to vote coming up in the convention. Cheryl?
I just have one question, because as I was looking through this, I really don't see anything major that changed at all from last year to this year. Am I correct in my reading?
Pretty much, we want more money for salaries and buildings. We want to be able to do things at a board level more than we have before. We're asking for that. Those types of things are really, we've been asking that for years and years, so.
Yeah, I didn't see that was really a change. That's kind of what it's all about.
That's correct. We changed some words to make that read better and clearer, but honestly, that's the easy answer. Lynn?
One of the things I like is Resolution 6. I think it's on page 11, number 2 particularly. You do call out the school finance formula of SB 19 as being good, which I think as a basis that's very, very good. And I also appreciate the opportunity communicating where school boards, state school board, and the legislature, the three groups that are that have the constitutional responsibility for K-12 education to work together. So I'm hoping that our legislators will hear that and understand that it's not just for the money. It really is how do we provide the education or the intellectual, education, vocational, and scientific improvement that our Constitution calls for. We often some come down to just simple money issues, but in order to do those things and to do the student capacities that the Rose capacities talk about, we have to do that with people, we have to do that with programs, and those are things that do take funding to do that. And in order to get all of our students up to what they can possibly be, it's going to take us all working together, all the different groups. So I appreciate that, and from that regard, I'd be very supportive of this information, make the motion that we instruct our delegate to vote in favor of these resolutions and issues on the legislative package.
Stan?
I'm sorry, did you second it? That's good.
Okay, I've got a motion by Lynn and a second by Cheryl. You got a comment from Stan?
I just had a quick question for either Mike or Lynn on the area of teacher due process. What was the progress or lack of progress on that area in the legislature last year?
Lynn, why don't you take that one?
We have it in our contract, so it does not apply to us. It did pass in the House. It got pulled out of a special committee. We tried to amend a bill that was amendable. It was not a bill that they were bringing above the line. When legislative leadership saw that that was a bill that could be amended for that purpose, they killed that bill and pulled it below the line. So we weren't even able to make a motion to amend it and have a discussion in the Senate. So I'm hopeful that we can do that going forward.
So 259 is committed to the due process procedure that we had prior to it being...
Right, it's in our contract.
Okay, all right.
Mike?
Joy?
Before we take the vote, I'm going to abstain in the voting on this, and the reason I want to just explain my reason is that we only received this document on Tuesday, and I know you've done a lot of work on it, but because of my schedule and some things I had going on, I didn't have a chance to review all of it in the depth I'd like to, or have that and then be able to have part of the conversation at the table. So I feel I don't want to vote against it because there are some really great things in here. So I think the honorable thing is to abstain. So I'm just going to take a seat over there until you're finished.
Any other comments? We have a motion on the floor. It's time to vote. Raise your right hand. I've got a 5-0.
Lynn,
Cheryl, yes.
Just a reminder that earlier at a previous meeting, we had also voted to ask Betty to support the KASB President-elect Shannon Kimball, and there is in this document on page 23 kind of a write-up about her.
Right. All right. Anything else on that item? Lynn?
I do have one item I'd like to bring up. I know it's not on the agenda, so we can't take action today, but if you're like me, you've been reading and trying to understand what is possible in our, what's being considered in the Congress on the tax reform situation. And there's a lot of consequences that are not being discussed. One of them, I think, is the lack or it will limit our ability to refinance bonds after January 1st. And I know our staff continually look at that, and our bond counsel, and so I brought that up and talked with staff about that. And I guess I'd like to ask the superintendent and her staff, have we looked at refinancing anything recently? Is it feasible? Would it save us money to do that? And can we still do it before 12/31?
We have a speaker on that. Hold on. I guess they want you to go to Mike's microphone.
So interestingly enough, we had been looking at refunding the 2010 Build America Bond series, and that had been on the radar now for about a month or two. We were actually considering bringing this to the board in the early spring as we had new board members take office. But as the tax reform has kind of coalesced, both the House and the Senate versions do have the prohibition after January 1st of refunding tax-exempt bonds. So this potential savings on these Build America bonds, if we want to try to capture that with certainty, we would need to take some action immediately, essentially. The present value net savings that is being forecasted if we would refund those bonds is $4.4 million, which we would do some sort of crossover refunding on these Build America bonds, and we don't get immediate savings. This is more of a long-term savings for the taxpayer. It would probably, we'd be looking at maybe $250,000 to $500,000. We need to crunch some more numbers to come back to you with that, but that would be some number of years down the road. So to your question on feasibility, yes, it's feasible, but the board would need to take appropriate action basically on Monday.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
And so, and again, just to bring everybody up, we've refinanced bonds maybe a half dozen times since 2000. And what that does, it's not $4 million that we can put into our budget for next year. It just means that over the remaining life of those bonds, that's $4 million less of interest that we'd have to pay. So that will save you and I as taxpayers on our mill levy. So we can reduce our mill levy from that standpoint. And we've done that a number of times. I think originally when we did the first bond issue, they were expecting about a 9.5% interest rate. I think our average rate is much, much lower. And this would lower it even more down to what would the
Right. The threshold for refunding bonds, the kind of the decision point, if you save 3%,
Yeah.
and this refunding would be at 4.4.
4.4,
So
so-
that is a good deal.
So that would save us. And walk us through what we would have to do and what the district has to do. So we'd have to pass a resolution.
That would be what would happen Monday if the board wants to proceed, is that the board would pass a resolution. Then we would get Gilmore Bell and George K. Baum basically working this at lightning speed, and we would come back to the board in about 3 weeks. We're hoping we could time it on the December 11th scheduled meeting. If we can't, we might have to have another special board meeting, but that would authorize the sale of the bonds.
Okay, and that's what we're doing is we're hiring George K. Baum to sell the bonds, the new bonds, and then they work all the paperwork with the bond council and those kind of things like we've done in the past, and we authorize the president or the district to approve those and do that type of thing. So,
Correct, and we would have we could have a more comprehensive presentation for Monday so that the board's fully informed.
And if we passed a resolution and we get into it and we find out that all of a sudden interest rates rise or something like that, it's not feasible, it's not going to save us the $4 million, we can cancel it at that point. We don't really have any obligation or cost at that point.
Absolutely. There is some concern that as this becomes a more possible reality, that the tax reform looks like it might pass, there is a possibility of the market kind of flooding with bond refunding. So if we don't appear to be at least hitting that 3% threshold, we don't have to proceed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I guess I would encourage us to think about putting a special board meeting together to give staff the ability to do this. I will leave that up to the president to, call that meeting if needed be. I do think it takes 2 days to notice, so we'd have to get on that right away in order to do that on Monday. So, and open to other discussion on the board.
Correct. We did cancel our board meeting that we had for Monday. So yes, we would have to get a new board meeting.
I need the meeting on the 20th. If we're going to move through this with the maximum number of days to get it finished by 12/31.
Okay. Cheryl?
Yeah, I just want to summarize to make sure that I am clear what we're being asked to do. This is really being driven by the House and Senate bills in Washington, D.C. And in the current bills in both of those, there is a clause that says, if you haven't approved this before January 1, you can't do it. Is that correct?
After January 1st, people that have bonds would not be able to do this anymore.
So you'd have to have this totally approved by January 1st in order to be able to take advantage, if we decide we want to at a later time, to refinance those bonds, correct?
Right. The option potentially is gone after January 1st. Now, do we know if tax reform is going to pass? No. But this is a good deal outside of tax reform. So it's just the speed that it needs to happen that's kind of being driven by tax reform.
So this was something we probably would have done in the spring.
Right.
Under normal circumstances, but our sense of urgency is driven by what's happening in Washington.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. And it will take a special meeting, then we'll have to approve it still in December in order to complete the process.
That's correct.
And it could save our taxpayers up to how much?
Well,
money?
it's a $4.4 million savings, net present value.
So
So
if
we're
we-
thinking we could reduce the mill levy at the 2021 date. So this is a long-term savings plan, approximately a half mil, but we need to crunch those numbers a little bit more.
Right. And this does not lock us into, as Senator Rogers said, we don't have to do this.
Don't have to do it.
If interest changes or
Right,
anything else.
Market
'Cause lots
changes,
of
there's a
things could
glut
happen.
of bonds, and when the bottom drops out, we do not have to proceed.
But the bottom line is, if we don't, we can't.
If tax reform passes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other comments? Joy?
Mike, I think this sounds like a great idea. I'm not here next week, so I just want to make sure we maybe take a poll, make sure we have at least 4 board members that would be here if we wanted to move forward. Do we?
What I would be looking at, as I'm talking to Dr. Thompson, would be to have the board meeting at noon on Monday in this room, if that works for everybody.
Team, we okay? We okay in here?
That would work for me.
I would prefer 11 or 1, but I can rearrange my lunch if we need to.
If 11 is better, I don't have a problem with that.
11 is better for me.
How about you, Stan?
11 is fine.
Betty?
Thank you.
Mike, I'd like to direct you to have a special meeting Monday the 20th at 11 p.m. or 11 a.m. Just want to make sure you were listening in this room, if you could, please. Thank you. Anything else we need to go over? As everybody's putting in their phone. Stan?
Just a quick reminder that I see former board member Barb Fuller in the room. It's good to see you. But a reminder that the deadline to put in your application to fill her seat is November 30th at noon.
All right. Next item, Mike.
Adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Joy and seconded by Cheryl. Cast your votes. Passes 6-0. See you on Monday.